Welcome to the Elevate podcast, brought to you by the Registered Master Builders. Each week we explore the ideas and practices that help us get the best from our businesses, our teams and ourselves. I'm your host, Ryan Castle. We talk to experts, advocates and business owners in the construction industry to share their knowledge, insights and experiences to help you build a better business and enjoy a better life. Now let the business building begin. Ever wonder why some building companies seem to be everywhere online while you're too busy actually building? In this episode of the Master Builders Elevate podcast, we sit down with Jodine McIntyre from Social Smarty to break down practical, no-fluff social media tips every builder can use. You'll learn how to post with purpose, show off your people, and turn your everyday projects into powerful marketing without needing a full-time marketing team. If you want your business to stand out, attract great clients, and even your next apprentice, this episode's for you. Let's dive in. Jodine McIntyre from Social Smarty, welcome along to the Elevate Master Builders podcast. So great to have you on the show today.
Thanks for having me. It's exciting to be here.
Now, Jodine, your reputation precedes you somewhat. You were recently presenting at Constructive, the major Master Builders event, and we've heard very, very good things.
Awesome. I love hearing that people enjoyed the session. I had so much fun. The whole event just blew me away. I couldn't believe how slick it was, the amazing speakers they had, and the huge turnout. It was such a great event to be a part of.
Yeah, I think it was the best one yet. And those are the words of Ankit, the CEO. Managed to catch up with him last week, and he was really excited about what could delivered at Constructive. And they've already got some massive plans for next year. So maybe you'll be requested as a return guest. Hey, let's dive into this podcast, Jodine. Your expertise is social media, most broadly. I'd be really interested before we maybe dive into some of the nitty gritty around social media and how our construction members and business owners can think about utilizing social media. Tell us a little bit about your journey. How have you arrived at the owner of Social Smarty?
So it's an interesting one. I was working for an organisation called Business Hawke's Bay, and that was our local sort of economic development, business-led economic development agency. And I was working from an office that was really unique. So it was a shared office, but there was about, I think, maybe 15 organisations there that were all around supporting businesses in Hawke's Bay. And so there was like New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, there was Chamber of Commerce, all these organisations under one roof. And what I found was, while my role was to sit out the back and do all of the digital marketing for the organisation, I would constantly get asked by my colleagues to come and have conversations with different business owners who had great ideas and they weren't quite sure how to get them off the ground in terms of the marketing side of things. And a lot of that focused on social media. So instead of doing all of the things I had to do in my day job, I'd end up sitting in meeting rooms with these incredible business owners and telling them, how to really use social media. And after a while, I started to realize, I think there's actually a business in this. So I resigned. And instead of my colleagues saying, oh, just go and grab Jodine from out the back, they said, here's Jodine's business card. So it was a really easy transition, but a little bit different. So in Hawke's Bay, there wasn't anyone who was offering just social media training. So there was lots of agencies that would do it for you. And some of those agencies as well would offer training. But often what would happen is the client would come in for some training and they would end up signing a contract just to hand the social media over to the agency. So it was a little bit unique for me to come in just as a trainer and just focus on the social media training rather than the done for you support the agencies offer.
Okay, let's explore that a little bit. Why do you think actually training people and giving people those skills are a useful approach compared to the agency? And if we were to put that in a construction context, maybe I'm a builder and I'm like, oh, well, I don't want to learn how to be a plumber, so I get someone else to do the plumbing for me. Why would in this context, it be helpful to learn to be across and somewhat au fait with social media?
Yeah, so I mean, I believe there's a lot more power in managing your own social media and being there when the exciting stuff is happening. Now, I don't deny that it's a big job. So if you want to outsource it, then absolutely go for it. But I think it is pretty obvious when someone else is taking the reins in the social media. You lose all of that in the moment stuff, you lose a little bit of the connection. Now, of course, there are agencies out there and freelancers that will become almost like an extension of your team, so you can make it work. Usually, you're almost paying to have another team member, so you should expect to pay more when you get that really good service. But if you can manage it so that it is manageable, and we're going to talk about some ways of how we can make it a little bit more manageable, but I think there is a lot of power in having, that control over your own social media, the connection, the language that you're speaking, the behind the scenes content that you can share, the in the moment content. I think there is some real power in that sort of connection piece there.
Indeed. And I think conversely, you can start doing some social media with ease and some small steps, and we'll talk about that. And to maybe dismantle the analogy I use, the challenge with doing your own plumbing is you need to go and train as a plumber, and there's a 4-year apprenticeship and all these kind of things, technical qualifications you need to get involved, compared to what you need to do with social media, which you can pick up some great tips, hopefully, out of this podcast and take your first step. So we'll keep going on that journey. I think maybe what would be helpful would be to define what social media is. We are just inundated now with platforms and different things that we can and can't do. When you refer to social media, what's in that container for you?
Yeah, so I mean, it is those social media platforms. So here in New Zealand, the big ones are Facebook and Instagram are sort of the top two. And then, of course, we have a TikTok, which is on the rise. And then, of course, we have the others like LinkedIn and YouTube and, some of these other platforms that kind of blur the lines between a social network like Pinterest, for example. And the way that I sort of try and explain it is that these are just platforms for people to connect. So if we take a step back and we remove the technology and all the scary stuff that, again, if we're thinking about, getting a degree to use these platforms, if we just actually pare it back, it is just a big online meeting place. And if you can speak to clients, if you can pick up the phone and answer a client's question, you can actually communicate via social media. So a little exercise I like to do with clients is just get them to close their eyes. And then I get them to imagine the biggest warehouse, like a massive big, Amazon warehouse. And then you fill that warehouse full of people, and you've just got people as far as the eye can see. And these groups of people, they're little circles, and they're having little conversations. They're talking about different topics. They might be talking about what's happening in the news, or maybe they're sharing, a recommendation about something, or talking about an experience they've had with a business. That's all social media is. So if we try and strip back the technical elements and what button to click and, all of that side of it, it really is just talking to people. And if you've got a successful business because you're good at communicating, then you can use that on social media.
I like that analogy. It's a really good one. Okay, let's imagine I am the owner of a construction company. I may have, let's call it, a familiarity with social media because I've been a user. Maybe I've been on Facebook. I've used Instagram a little. Where would be the place for me to start with using social media for promoting my own business or maybe my team? Where would I start?
So the first thing we need to do is the foundation. So in the same way that we prepare a site to build a house, we're going to prepare our foundations. What often happens is we try and get really deep into the content, into the videos and, what are we going to take photos of and that sort of thing. But we haven't got the foundation set up right. So the first thing I always do when I'm working with clients or even in a workshop or even what I spoke about at Constructive was around making sure that your profiles are set up correctly so that we've got the links through. So if someone does discover you on social media, are we getting them through to the website? Are we getting them to an inquiry form? Do we have our phone number in there, our email address? Do we have a name? If they find your company and they're going to give you a call, do they know who's going to be answering the phone on the other end there? So it's just a really good idea to get a friend to have a look at your Facebook page for you, your Instagram account, all of your social accounts, because when you're logged in as an admin, you get quite a different view. So there's a few buttons and things that you might not see as an admin. So just just get a friend to have a look, or, have a look over their shoulder and just see what you can see. Does it make sense? Are all the buttons working? Have we got all the key contact information? Have we got a bit of a bio or an intro around, what makes us special, what we specialize in? Maybe we can refer to being a master builder, and what that means for for your potential clients or customers as well. So making sure the foundations are set up right. And then the other thing is that we need a plan. Like, you wouldn't start building a house, just off the cuff, just making it up as you go. And I think that's another way that a lot of businesses approach social media, is they're just posting on the fly. Oh, it's Tuesday, we haven't posted for a week. Let's take a quick photo. What's going on? Usually it's framing. I don't know how many framing photos I've seen in various construction social media accounts. And then they just pop up a post. So let's have a plan. Let's take a step back and say, what is social media actually going to do for our business? And then how can we create content that helps with that? And typically there's different types of content. So we can't rely on one post to do everything. It's not going to introduce us to brand new customers, convince them to work with us, and then generate an inquiry. Like, that's a lot of heavy lifting for one social media post to do. So usually we'll have a plan that has a mix of social media content. So some content will be around that brand awareness. It will getting people to learn that we exist, popping up in their feed, getting them to notice us. We'll have other content that is around those people that are in that consideration phase. They want to do their research. They might be deciding between a couple of builders. They want to scroll through your accounts. They want to see examples of your work, testimonials, have people tagged you in other content. They want to do their research. And then, of course, we might have some special offers or some availability. Maybe we've got, a job that's fallen through. We might not word it that way, but, suddenly we have availability for next month. And maybe we have some things that we really specialize in, and we want to talk about those. And that can be more of that conversion or that real decision-making piece. So thinking about, let's put together a plan, what do we want to achieve with social media, and how do we create content that fits into that?
Okay. And Jodine, when you're working with a construction company, is this plan, I assume you would help them build, is it a one-page document? Is it a 100-page document? What kind of does that kind of tend to look like for them?
Tends to look like one page document. So we want to keep it simple. I don't want to create a strategy that sits on the shelf and gathers dust that you never look at. So we need to think about what's our mix of content going to look like. So different people can approach it in different ways. So you might hear social media experts talking about content pillars or content themes. All these are as sort of topics or ideas that we rotate through. I teach a little bit differently. I come back to the purpose behind the content. So I teach you to create expert posts, connection posts, action posts, and then sales posts. And then we just rotate through. So it's around getting an understanding of, each of these posts have a different purpose. And then how do we create the content that feeds into that? And chances are you've already got a whole lot of stuff to use. If you have spent money on getting a flash website, or you've had a copywriter put together, copy for your website, you've got a nice glossy brochure, all of that content that's in there, all of the messaging, the wording, we can be using in your social media.
Rework. Could you unpack each of those 4 types with a quick example for us, just to help us understand?
Yeah, of course. So an expert post is about proving that we can trust you. You're not a cowboy, so we can see you know what you're talking about. So this can be a really popular post type in the construction industry would be your before and after. So if you're brought in to do a job, but we're going to explain it in a way that shows that you know what you're doing. So if it's a renovation, we can talk about the challenges the client were facing, what they weren't happy with, and what they wanted to achieve, and then how we went about achieving it for them. And then we have the connection post. I like to think of connection posts as about the people within your company. So a lot of the decision-making process is not always on the black and white, the nitty-gritty, the quote, the exact dollar amount. It might be about the person and how we connect with that person. So if we're not showing our face and showing our people in our social media content, we're really missing a trick. So connection posts are about people. So it might be showing off, your morning t-shirt, or it could be an apprentice who's just had a qualification, or it could be even just team intros, just letting people see that there's people behind this business. We're willing to put our faces out there on social media. And then we come into the action posts. So action posts are an interesting one. So action posts are just around driving engagement. Because if we think about the way that social media works, when we log into Facebook, Instagram, any of these platforms, the content we're showing is in a particular order, and it's in the order of relevancy. So the platform's trying to figure out what's most relevant to us, and then it puts that content at the top of our feed. So if we engage with the business's content, that is telling the platform that that content is relevant to us. So if we can drive more engagement, in theory, we should reach more people. So an action post is a question. It's a poll. It's showing two different options, dark outside paint or light outside paint, or a round mirror in a bathroom or a square mirror. Which one would you choose? It's just a really quick, easy post to get people to take some action. And then, because we're running a business, we need to sell. So our sales posts are typically the ones that are very promotional and will get the least amount of engagement, and usually because of that they reach the fewest people, but they are the ones that will drive the conversions. Those are the ones where people are doing their research that they're going to see, and then they're going to click through. So that is for our sort of, ready to buy, ready to take the next step. So we need the mix of those 4 different posts.
Okay, love that. Thanks for explaining. It's really, really helpful. So you've talked about the various platform options. I hear you mainly skewing towards maybe Facebook and Instagram. Can you give us a bit of insight as to why you're finding those, and then maybe what you're seeing with the TikTok trend?
Yeah, so with Facebook and Instagram, I hear a lot of talk around Facebook is dying. Facebook's just not relevant anymore. I would push back on that. I think that the stats here in New Zealand specifically, we're typically a little bit behind the curve and, new tech adoption, that sort of thing. So I think, Facebook is still highly relevant. I think a big part of that is because of the community groups and the group aspect on Facebook. So when I want to know what's happening in my local community, when the power's out, when, there's a big bang and you want to know what's going on, we all turn to those Facebook groups, those local community groups. So because of that, I think that, we still have a lot of activity that's happening on Facebook. Instagram is growing very, very rapidly. They've just hit 3 billion monthly active users, which is a big number. Instagram is great, but it is very visual. You can't just create a text post on Instagram. It has to have a photo or a video element to it. So because of that, there's a lot of, people will save posts when they see a great deck or a great outdoor area and they think, oh, that's really inspirational, almost a little bit like Pinterest, and we'll save that post to come back to. And then TikTok. So TikTok is really taking the place of something like Netflix. So TikTok is more of an entertainment style platform. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense with the sound off. So whereas Facebook and Instagram, we're quite used to scrolling with the sound off, whereas TikTok, you need the sound on. So because of that, it is more of and because it's video, it is much more of a sort of an entertainment-based platform. So it's really great for awareness if you treat it right. So we're not going to go to TikTok and really talk about, all the nitty-gritty and be really heavy on the sales side of things. We're going to think about it as an entertainment platform. So almost like if you had a reality show around your business, how would you make it entertaining, informative, interesting to get someone's attention? And then we will have a portion that want to know more, that want to go deeper with your business. But if you're going to just use TikTok and just post, we've got availability next week, we can do a deck or, something like that, it's not going to work for you. You've got to treat it in the way that people use it.
Okay. And what kind of guidance would you give? And I assume you kind of cover this in the planning component of who's our target market. So if I'm doing renovations that tend to be $1 million plus in budget size, and they're on old villas, I imagine the demographic of person buying that is somewhat different to maybe someone buying a first home in a let's call it a more affordable suburb, and age-wise, demographic-wise, going to be a bit different. Would you look to maybe start on different platforms given those different demographics?
You could do. I still think Facebook is a really good place to start. There are, for example, really active first home buyer groups, Facebook groups here in New Zealand. So, where there are young people that are really wanting to know around buying their first home. So there are still the younger demographics that are using Facebook. I mean, Instagram's a bit of a no-brainer. The great thing is that Meta owns both, so it's very easy to set up a system so that we create content that's going out to both the platforms. But TikTok is a lot of effort. So even if you said to me, look, I really want to reach a younger market, I know that they're all over TikTok, that's only part of it. We need to think about your content strategy as well, because like I said, if we're just going to be posting really low effort, like simple content over there, that's not going to work. So it's not just about where, but also what resource do you have to create that content to make sure we've got the content fit for the platform.
Okay. Here's a question which came to mind for me is, what's the emotional journey like for someone starting out on social media?
Yeah.
I can imagine it's like, oh, we've committed, we're all excited, we're going to go and we've got our first posts out. Oh, we've been doing it for a week now and no one's committed to buy a new house with us yet.
Yeah.
Unrealistic expectations, of course, but how do you have people think about the commitment to social media and kind of how much time might be required in terms of duration of continued effort before they might start seeing some results from that effort?
Yeah, I think the tricky thing is that social media is often it's not like we are driving people through to an impulse purchase. So even if you ask someone, like maybe you get to that meeting and you say, hey, do you mind me asking where you heard about us? And I'm hoping that, everyone, all the businesses listening are taking that data and they're collecting that data. But sometimes they have actually seen you on social media. Maybe they've done their research on your social media accounts, but maybe it was word of mouth, in that first instance and how they heard about you. So even though we've got all the metrics, we've got all the data, we can go into the analytics for your website and see literally how much traffic social media is driving through. I think we also need to recognize that it is part of that buyer journey, that customer journey. It doesn't always have to be, I saw your Facebook post and I'm here and I've booked in a new build. Like that's just not how it works. So we need to think about social media as being part of that puzzle. And I think, there's lots of stats. We used to talk about needing 7 touch points before we make a decision. If we're thinking about a new build, I'm sure it's going to be a heck of a lot more than 7 touch points. But social media can be just, multiple touch points within that journey. So you're right, we need to have realistic expectations. But the metrics are there, so we can actually see how much traffic is being driven to your website. And again, we need to be thinking about what is that journey and what's the next step. How do we keep people in our ecosystem? So for example, we might be running some Facebook ads, but instead of just sending them to the homepage of our website, we might be sending them to a landing page. And then on that landing page, we have a form which invites them to download a brochure. And then we've got the contact details. But if we're just driving them to the homepage and leaving them to flounder around and click on some buttons and, we could potentially, they get a notification and they've forgotten all about us, we need to be thinking smarter about how do we keep them in that ecosystem. So, yeah.
Okay, great. What's a good example of a, let's call it an offer that you've seen on the landing page? So we've used our social media content to bring our audience to our landing page. And then, one of the terms that get used is lead magnet. So that might be, what are the top 10 mistakes that new home builders make, or, one of those good things. Curious, what's an example of something you've seen that's worked well in that kind of next stage of stepping them away from just observing us on social media to being prepared to share things like contact information to get the thing of value we have? What's some good examples you got there?
Well, I think we can move past the top 10 tips. I think, buyers are a little bit more clued up now. We can Google those, we can ask ChatGPT. I think we need to really think of it as a value exchange. So if someone is going to hand over their details, they know that they are, you're going to be in touch. So we need to offer them something of value. And I still see a lot of construction companies that will put a lot of effort into these beautiful brochures that they've had designed that have, perhaps it's plans and layouts and all this great information, but they don't have it gated. They don't have it so that you have to hand over the button and they click and the PDF download. So I would happily, if I was in that real consideration phase and I was looking at different companies, even if it is just information about the company, but it's, that deeper information, I would happily hand over my email address. But yeah, I think we just need to think a little bit smarter around this is an exchange of value. People aren't just going to invite you into their inbox or, let them call you up on the phone to have a chat without some sort of exchange of value. So yeah, I can't think of an exact example off the top of my head, but I think we can move away from the top 10 tips, that sort of thing.
Okay. What are some of the observations you're seeing of people that are doing social media well in the construction space?
So the observations are having their people as a focus of a lot of their content. Because, like I said, when I see another picture of framing, it really doesn't mean a lot to me. Another builder, it might mean a lot to, but that's not your target audience, is it? So we need to think about it. How do we connect with these people? Having their team featured heavily in their content, that works really well. And that's the type of content that typically reaches a lot more people. Because if we come back to why social media was created, it was to connect people. So it makes sense that our posts that actually feature people will perform better than our really promotional notice board, like, have you thought about working with us, or we're offering a 10% discount or something like that. That kind of content typically doesn't reach as many people. So when we include our people, when we include behind the scenes, the sort of stuff that you might not necessarily get to see, it's not just the glossy professional photography, branded, lots of logos, that sort of content. It's the real, raw, behind the scenes, a little bit less polished, that post that pops up that could just be your mate posting, but actually it's a local building company that's sharing something that's happening with them. I think that's the sort of content that's working really well.
And we're hopeful that we're starting to see the economy lift, that we'll be starting to see increased demand in the market. So that will be good for all sorts of reasons. But certainly one of the things we see through the cycles is that as the construction industry gets busier, the war for talent, finding great people to come and work for you gets harder and harder. So I think, again, this people-centric approach allows someone from the outside going, oh, would I like to go and work for that company? And it also almost gives them a little chance to observe who you are and how you work with your team from afar, of course, but gives them a little bit of that insight to go, oh, yeah, actually, I might talk to those guys about whether they've got a job going. So it's a bonus of the content with being a people focus, I think.
And I've literally had construction companies, not lately, but certainly in the past, have come to me and said, hey, we've got jobs booked out for the next 3 years. We don't want to use social media for that purpose. What we want to do is demonstrate what a fantastic place we are to work. So when they were creating their content, instead of speaking to, potential customers or clients, they were literally showing the culture, what happens behind the scenes with their team. And then they actually got, we only worked together for a short period, but they found 2 really great staff members through social media, and it was just a completely different approach. But as I said, that was a little while ago, but a little bit easier, I think.
It'll come back. It'll come back.
Yeah.
Okay, here's curiosity around starting with organic posting. So posting that we can do on social media that doesn't cost us anything. We're just adding it to our own accounts versus paid ads, etc. Do you have a guidance for organizations whether they should start organic and go to paid, whether they should start with paid? What's your guidance there?
Yeah, so definitely I wouldn't do paid without the organic. We need to have that content. The thing that I think a lot of businesses don't understand is that if we set up an ad campaign through Meta Ads Manager and we go in and we get through all the technical stuff, that ad is only shown to the audience that we choose. So that ad's not sitting on their profile. So if someone sees the ad and then goes back to the profile and they haven't posted for a year, that's not a very good look. We need to have that organic supplementing the paid as well. And what I would say around that paid social media is that you really need to have a good plan. So if, for example, you're going to drive traffic to the website, but the website's not converting, people aren't filling in your forms, they're not downloading your lead magnets, they're not doing the things you want them to, don't try and run paid campaigns to your website. We need to fix the website first, otherwise we're just trying to fill a leaky bucket. We're just paying money to drive people to a website that's not doing its job. So we need to get a little bit strategic before we start spending money. The first thing that usually happens is someone will boost a post. They'll get into a bit of a groove with their organic. They'll get a notification from Meta saying, hey, did you know you can reach another 10,000 people if you pay $20? They'll say, oh, cool. They'll click on a couple of buttons. Meta says, don't you worry about it. Just give me your money. I'll sort everything else out. And then they really don't see any return because they don't even really know what they've done. And then they come to me and say, oh, we've tried advertising. It doesn't work. And boosting posts is your sort of entry level, but you've got to be in control of the settings in there. You've got to know what your objective is, who you're targeting, what audience you've got set there. So there are some key things you need to do in there. It's not hard, but you just need to take a step back, read what it actually says and go through that sort of, step-by-step process there. But coming back to the organic, I think that yeah, it is challenging because sometimes we post and we feel like no one's seeing our content and no one's engaging with it. And maybe if we just ran some ads, we'd get some better results. But I would just push back and say, hey, let's just focus on getting that organic up and running and getting really clear on what we want those paid ads to do. How much are you willing to spend? What is the outcome? Again, to get a lead, a solid job through paid social media, you need to think about how much you're willing to spend. You're not going to turn on an ad and get, $5 a lead and suddenly your books are full and you've spent $20. That's just not how it happens. So we need to think a little bit strategically before we start throwing money at it.
Yeah. But if you do have a good plan in place, you've got your foundation sorted, websites, these kind of things where you're sending your traffic to if they're in a good place. The nice thing about construction is the value of the purchase is significant. So you can afford to spend a reasonable amount of customer acquisition cost to get there. The way I always like to think of this is saying to a business owner, if I could give you your perfect client right now, how much money would you put in my hand for me to give you that perfect client? And it often gives some really good context for how they might think about what their spend would be. And of course, we're not suggesting that all of your media spend or advertising spend should be on social media, but it does help give some context around what I would pay to get my perfect client in the door.
Yeah, absolutely. And every industry is different, and you've just got to think about what is that customer value? What does that one customer mean to you? And again, like you said, how much would you pay to get that client?
Okay. Jodine, do you have any resources that our members could access to maybe help them start thinking about how they could lay out their social media plan?
Yeah, so I have a free planning guide on my website that goes through those different post types, which I talked about. So socialsmarty.co/freebies. And if you scroll down to the planner there's also other freebies on that page, believe it or not. I can show you how to create carousel posts that look really, really slick in Instagram. I've talked about creating reels. There's all sorts of freebies that you can download there. And I promise you, if you're going to trust me with your email address, there is definitely value in there for you.
Nice. So does that mean with carousel posts, I can not just have one photo of my framing, but I can have like 10 photos of my framing all in one go?
Yeah, and so the way that I teach you in that particular freebie is how to create a seamless post. So if you've ever seen those carousel posts, so it's multiple images you swipe through, but you might have a bit of visual that spans over two different images. So what it does is it really encourages people to swipe through and see the rest of that post. And as someone is swiping, that is engagement. So that's telling the platform, it's telling the Instagram algorithm that people are interested in this content and therefore push it out to more people. So it can be a really easy way to get some good engagement on a post, just having that really lovely visual.
Great. Hey, Jodine, some of your insights today have been super helpful. I love how practical you are. Some of those tips are really powerful, and I'm sure you've got some of our audience thinking about how they could embark on their social media or maybe even rejuvenate social media if it's something that they started but haven't managed to continue with. If people want to engage with you, you've given us the socialsmarty.co.nz/freebies. Where else is good? Oh, .co, thank you.
Yep, just .co, not .co.nz. Yeah.
Okay, great. And we will make sure we put that link in the podcast notes so people can access it nice and easily. Whereabouts should people connect with you on social media?
Yeah, so you can find me all over social media, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, everywhere. My username is at socialsmarty.co. Another little tip is keep your usernames the same if you can across platforms. So then you've got one clear message, and also if people are tagging you. So at socialsmarty.co. I also have a YouTube channel. So if you search for Social Smarty, there's lots of free tutorials on there.
That's great. Hey, Jodine, thanks for being so open with your knowledge, sharing with our listeners today. And we'll make sure those are in the show notes, your social handles as well, so people can instantly connect with you there. Thanks for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you.